There we go.
Only the second title is Skin in the Game. But
Das Risiko in Cispris. How do you say it?
das Risiko und sein Preis.
Das Risiko und sein Preis. Okay.
Ja, ganz genau.
Very cool.
Now you're a German officially.
Da. Oh no, it's not even da in German. That's Russian.
That's Russian, yeah. Привет.
That's funny. Yeah, it's a great book, honestly. It's one of Taleb's best, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And have you read the entire Incerto?
I did not read yet The Bed of Procrustes, but I guess it's an off aphorism collection, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not. I wouldn't put it on the same league as the other ones. It's only, I don't know. I think it's like a 2-hour audio book, and it's much more of just kind of aphorisms and pithy sayings than it is like meat and potatoes, Nassim Taleb, like mental models and stuff like that.
Yeah, but what I definitely liked about this book is that it's so it's written like an essay. You can read it and you can just go into the book and start somewhere, and it always is somehow fun. And he has this attitude. Sometimes I don't like his attitude when he dismisses people and stuff, but I see his points. So actually the value of the book is immense, and the points he's making are really valuable as heuristics you can use in your life, or even used for making decisions and use for seeing the patterns in the world with a clearer sight. Like,
yeah,
reading his books somehow was a view quake for me. Like, I did see the world in a certain way, and then I was walking through it and thinking, oh yeah, this is some kind of this pattern type, and this is one of this. But he shook it and established it on a much firmer basis. And how did you like the book? Did you read the whole Incerto series?
Yeah, I've read the whole Incerto series, and this time when I reread Skin in the Game, I actually only got 3/4 of the way through before we recorded. But it's one of my favorite books by Taleb. I would say it's my second favorite behind Anti-Fragile.
Same for me.
Nice. And I also like the sort of pugnacious attitude that Taleb takes, just absolutely firing shots at about everybody you could think of, including entire groups of people such as economists, politicians, just what he calls the IYIs, intellectual yet idiots, really taking a stance against people who have asymmetric gains without risks involved in the world. So people that are your CEOs who are taking big bonuses every year, and when everything blows up, they don't lose anything. They don't have. It's the taxpayers that bail them out, or it's the shareholders that lose anything. They don't take back the yearly bonuses that they got taking all these hidden risks for decades. They just kind of land on a golden parachute. And I would also say that Taleb's pugnacious attitude, attacking many people, is in itself a demonstration of and walking the talk of skin in the game. Because when you're calling out all of these high-powered people with large audiences, in
Mm.
all of your works with your ideas, then you're thereby inviting all of these people to then turn around and criticize you back and criticize your
Yeah.
ideas and compare what you have to say versus what they have to say. You're inviting criticism, you're inviting attack, you're inviting people
Hmm.
to come at you in your ideas, which is in itself a demonstration of skin in the game and sort of a declaration that his ideas are robust and will stand up
Hmm.
to the scrutiny of the people that he's criticizing and the movements that he's criticizing. To kind of
Definitely.
Yeah, and to kind of take a step back for those who haven't read the book that may be listening, how I would summarize skin in the game, and I'd love to hear you add on the pieces that I missed, but really he's exploring the what he calls the hidden asymmetries in everyday life, the ways in which a disproportionate impact comes from a small group of people or a small effect, the ways that there are people who have everything to gain from something but nothing to lose, the ways that people will build an entire career sort of peddling ideas and pushing things in motion and messing with complex systems. And then when their ideas don't work, they're not held accountable. They continue to be praised and to be put into position of power and influence and to financially benefit from what they're doing, as well as people managing large organizations that, like I said, they take risks with other people's money. And then when things go well, when they're sort of playing Russian roulette over and over and winning, so to speak, they get their yearly bonus every year. They get their stock options. They get their large CEO salaries, or in Congress, they get their reelections. And then when things go bad, nobody comes after them. Nobody, they don't have any penalty to pay for the actual consequences of the actions that they take and the ideas that they peddle. They
Hmm.
mess around with all these complex systems. They gain accolades. They do things that are intentionally complex and intentionally designed not to achieve the best impact in the real world, which is often through simple solutions, which is often through things with trade offs and things with consequences and drawbacks, but rather peddling ideas that are so complex, pulling strings on very complicated systems and doing far more harm than good. But because it's a complex system, say it's an economy, or say it's a bank, or say it's a political institution, or say it's the United States when people are voting to go to the Iraq War, those people didn't have skin in the game. You used to have Roman emperors who would almost always die in office. You used to have kings who would
Hmm.
be on the front lines with their troops. Now you have senators who are just voting to send people to blow up people that they've never met, that they have nothing to do with, voting to send other people's children to go do that. And when things go bad, nobody comes after them. They don't pay any consequences. They get reelected every 6 years. They stay in office forever. They never die in office. And they die of natural causes when they're 90 years old after leaving a trail of failures. You might even become elected president after a sea of failures and you never pay the consequence for, that other people
Hmm.
are constantly paying the consequence for. So a lot of this book is looking at what it looks like when you have people who are benefiting a lot, but they don't pay any consequences when things go bad. And on the alternative side, he takes an investigation of what it looks like to have skin in the game and what he considers to be a virtuous path, where, as let's say an entrepreneur, you go out there, you make stuff happen, you have a lot to gain, but if I, for example, don't show up to work next week, or if I don't do well next month, I will absolutely go from being very successful, being very, from having a lot that I want and from being sort of at the top of some distributions to all the way to the bottom. I have absolutely everything to lose. Everything can be taken from me if I don't actually achieve results in the real world. I'm accountable to the real world. For my case, I'm accountable to the free market. For some scientists, they're accountable to experiments and results. But what he is largely contrasting that with, and also salespeople, they're accountable to how much money they're bringing in for their firm, or traders, they're accountable for how their trades do in terms of making money or losing money. But he contrasts that to people who are professional managers of firms, who the firm goes well, they do well, the firm goes poorly, they still do well. They never can fall off of their golden pedestal. They never have anything to lose because they don't have skin in the game. And when that happens, people don't make optimal decisions. You don't get the optimal people at the top position. Rather, you get the people who are best at playing politics. You get the people that are best at managing their reputation amongst their peers. And that corrupts pretty much any system. You see it corrupting academia, you see it corrupting corporations, you see it corrupting the government, you see it corrupting all kinds of situations where when somebody fails, they aren't eliminated, they aren't terminated. Natural selection works via the
Hmm.
death of the players in the system who can't survive. That's completely removed from more and more and more of these complex systems in our modern
Yeah.
world. And it leads to corruption, it leads to bad results, it leads to crooks and people who just siphon off and are parasitic of the system and don't pay consequences for when their ideas, for when their actions, for when their projects turn into disasters for other people. It's other people that pay the consequences. It's the Spanish teacher and the plumber and the grammar tutor that are bailing out these banks after these CEOs were gathering $100 million bonuses every year. It wasn't the
Yeah.
CEOs that were disgraced that were paying the cost of this great collapse at everybody else's expense. Those people
Mhm.
got the biggest bonuses paid out ever in 2010 after all this shit went down, after the government bailed them out. They don't have any skin in the game, and so they're going to continue to operate with these bad incentives, with these moral hazards, corrupt the system further, and cause bad outcomes. And it's not just the banks; it's also the government. It's also lots of different organizations where fundamentally people are promoted, people are given prestige, people are given positions, people are given power based off of reputation rather than based off of accountability to the real world in the form of free markets, in the form of some form of tangible result that they're trying to achieve.
Mhm. Yeah, really clear and concise thoughts of you. And what I would add is that this one big idea of the difference between rent seekers and risk takers
Yeah.
is making a whole difference to how I view the world, how I view political systems, and how I view people who take risks and invest in themselves, in their enterprises, will fail if their ship sinks. They go down with their ship. But if people in positions where the hidden asymmetries of life, what Taleb talks about, taken place, where they gain anti-fragility on the backs of the working people.
Hmm.
Those ones are rent seekers. And that's a shame that this is incentivized in a way. And I guess much of his book just wants to make it clear that it should be less attractive to be a rent seeker. It should be more attractive to be a risk taker. And because risk and reward goes hand in hand, those people who take risks with their money and time, their resources, and have a reward, um, some of them have a big reward and they will grow rich. Some of them don't have any reward and die in debt or indebted and poor. But the basic point is that people mistake people who are rich for the enemy, not people who are rich and don't give something back in return, or are rich because they got in a position where they gained all these rewards on the back of people, on the back of hidden risks, like like banks continuously making money, and then on one blow up they lose more than they ever made. But the bonuses that got paid to the top management uh, will stay at the top management. They don't have to pay any penalty, and at least some penalty has to be involved in the future. So like in Switzerland, I guess this is one country that introduced at least some penalty for the people who got paid big bonuses earlier. If the ship sinks, they will at least have a little bit less of that what they gained in the future, in the past. So this is one big idea that I took from the book. that it's a difference between rich and poor. It's not the difference that the rich are evil and the poor are good, but it's the difference whether the risk takers that became rich, there are also a lot of risk takers that stayed poor.
Yeah.
But the real enemy is the rent seekers that did nothing for society in return, but gained on the backs of the working class people.
Yeah, and that ties into the concept of dynamic versus static inequality, in which is more tolerable than the other. A lot of times these days, people will look at static inequality figures and see, okay, this is how much the top 1% made this year. This is how much the next X people made this year. This is how much the next XYZ people made this year. This is the situation. But in reality, that's very misleading because you could have the same picture of static inequality, but have two different realities. You could have one reality where it's like that, and that top 1% is enshrined in every single year. The exact same people are the ones that their entire life, they're just locked in there at the top. And in a different scenario, you have a different 1% every single year where some people are constantly shuffling in and out and people are occupying every position of the economic hierarchy at some point in their lives. And obviously, every country is at some point in between these two states. And quite clearly, the more tolerable situation is when you have, if you have the same static inequality, which is like taking one snapshot, you want a dynamic inequality that tends toward fairness. So one where you have 20% of the population being in the 1% at some point in their life, and half the population being in the top 10% at some point in your life, which is actually closer to the reality in the United States, for example, but not in Europe, where the majority of people that are in the 1% were born there. It's not the case here. And there's a huge difference in, even if you have more static inequality, in my opinion, and also in Taleb's opinion, you want to minimize your dynamic inequality. You want to make it to where people are not tied to where they're born, even if there is vast differences in what's going on at any given time. You want the people that are at the very top to have the same risk of ending up at a soup kitchen as the people at the bottom. You want the people at the top to have fragile, I guess, more fragile circumstances with skin in the game where they can be knocked off their pedestal as soon as they're not performing, as soon as they're not getting real world results. They're actually held accountable. They can fall as far as they've climbed, rather than being in a situation where you're a CEO and you just gain a reputation amongst other CEOs running companies that if they lose money, you don't lose money. I used to work at a corporation where literally all that, like, we were not succeeding as a company. We were getting outcompeted. I was at Unilever. We were getting outcompeted by Procter and Gamble. We were getting outcompeted by Johnson and Johnson. We were getting outcompeted by Reckitt Benckiser. In every category, we were getting demolished. And yet, people at the company would just manipulate certain metrics. They were incentivized based on growth. And so what would they do? They would sell all their bigger brands that were very profitable, that were growing at slow rates, and they would go buy and overpay for a bunch of startup brands that were growing faster. And so they would sell brands at like a 3, 4, 5 multiple of their earnings. They would go buy brands for like 10 multiples of their earnings, or 12 or 20. And by doing this, they were constantly getting these things they would buy it, and then the growth would just decelerate, and they would sell these things, and they would lose all these profit centers of the company. But they were just manipulating through mergers and acquisitions these metrics. The people at the top were getting rewarded. The stock price stayed exactly the same. It gained no value for the shareholders for like 5 years. But yet all these people were patting themselves on the back about this completely manipulated fake growth. And meanwhile, not actually achieving anything, like not getting good results and losing versus all their competitors. But yet the people at the top of the company were getting promoted. They were getting encouraged. They were just they were just manipulating the reputation of their peers and manipulating their metrics by doing things that weren't actually creating any value for anybody. But because they had no skin in the game, all they had to do was just have a better reputation amongst other people in the company. They would keep getting promoted, they would keep getting richer, and they would keep getting higher and higher positions, higher salaries. When their brand sucked, they literally would just go to a different place. They would just get a new job where they made more money. They would fall up every time. It was totally absurd to me. And it was especially the people that were executive level and above. I think I was in a business where they were especially ineffective. We were losing all the time, but yet the people that were at the top were winning. They were the only ones getting promoted when the people at the bottom were not. And you can see how in a system where nobody actually loses money when their brands lose money, when their responsibility fails, everybody can just point fingers and make excuses because it's a complex system and everybody's doing things that just sound like they're a good idea, even though they don't actually achieve any results, then the system gets completely corrupted. The whole corporation was just so bloated, so ineffective, so bureaucratic, took forever to get anything done. And that was like, and it was just actually not performing well. But this whole time, all the people that were supposed to be making it perform well, that were in charge of it, were the only ones that were succeeding, the only ones that were making money, the only ones with the most stable careers, the most, and who could never fall from this position. When a brand lost money, they didn't lose any money. They got a promotion and went to some other part of the company where they got to mess something else up. It was a microcosm of a lot of these situations that Taleb was talking about.
That leads to the point that if the system gets corrupted because of this hidden asymmetries, because of this corruptedness of the incentives that the people have, that people just sell off their cash cows and optimize for a metric that is
Yeah.
only benefiting them on the course of the whole system and the whole performance of the system in the future, then it's leading to a much sooner death of this system and all the people involved in it and all the people with their lives depending on it than it would have been if the people who made the decisions also had some skin in the game and would be incentivized in a manner where they incentivize for long existence and a good and healthy system. That's also another great idea I took from the book, is that it's all about survival. If there is an absorbing barrier involved in taking a risk, try to invert and ask yourself, what could absolutely blow me up? What could kill me completely? And then avoid taking those risks, or avoid setting too much chips at taking these risks. And survival is everything. Therefore, don't put all your eggs into one basket. If you want to keep something, if you want to have this barrier that you won't be ruined if something goes wrong, put all into one basket. If you have this skin in the game and you are a wolf, then by all means just do it and just risk it all, but also know the consequences of your decisions. And this is also a point of Taleb saying, okay, it's okay to be a wolf and be free, and you have to make a kill for your living, you have to survive, and you have to find your food somewhere. You have to be able to go without food for days and days. It's also okay to be a dog and be fed every day, and to know that your master will come and feed you. But both things are okay. Different risks are involved. The dog, maybe his owner dies and now he doesn't know how to survive. But the wolf, maybe there's some competing wolves and he gets eaten or teared apart, or he does not find any food, or his skills in killing slow down and he grows old and then he dies. But never be a dog who says he's a wolf.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the wolf and dog thing, and the story behind that is, or a sort of a fable is, there's a dog talking to a wolf, and he's like, yeah, I have it awesome. I go in, There's air conditioning during the summer, there's heat during the winter. I'm never cold. Every time I get hungry, there's food in my dish. Every time I get thirsty, there's water in my dish. Somebody pets me and tells me I'm a good boy every day. And the wolf is like, holy shit, like this sounds awesome. How do I go about getting a life where all this is given to me? And then he asks like, well, what's that collar? And what's this like what is the fence that you're in? And then the dog explains to him what these things are for, and the wolf is horrified. He says, never, I would rather starve than have your meals. I would rather fend for myself and survive than have these shackles that you have. And not necessarily that it's wrong to be a dog or it's right to be a wolf or anything like that, but just in understanding that um, freedom entails risk. Like freedom means you have skin in the game. They're directly related. When you have skin in the game, when you have to survive, when you can die, when you have it on the line, like freedom comes with that, but also potential chance of disaster. And so you really have to look at this whole equation at once. Like what is my like personal alignment between like do I fear risk more, or do I love freedom more? And I think that's got to be a trade-off that people should have in the front of their minds when they're thinking about the path that they go down and whether they want to choose to be a wolf or a dog. And just like the you mentioned earlier, the dog has like a what Taleb would call like an illusory stability, an illusory sense that things are just perfectly under control. But what is hidden is the fragility. What's hidden is the blow up risk. The wolf knows that he's got to go hunt his meal tomorrow. The wolf is used to going out and surviving every day. The dog is in a position where he never has to survive. But then when his owner dies, what happens to unwanted dogs? In most countries, they get put down. What happens when you're a dog in the old times? You're living with an owner who's out on a farm, and the owner dies. Obviously, nobody's there to take care of you. You've not spent your whole life hunting and making something for yourself like a wolf. You might even be trapped inside without food and not able to even open a door. The difference between being a dog and a wolf is significant, and you can see that happen in the real life. Somebody is a company man at IBM for his whole life. He spends 30 years just pouring into this one hierarchy, this one system of values, this one peer network. And then we see in the 1980s there's all this mergers and acquisitions in the technology sector, and all of a sudden somebody's made redundant who's been a dog his whole life, who's just been fed hand to mouth from a salary for all these decades, and then all of a sudden, how do I survive in the real world? They're completely unequipped to go to a different place, to a different environment, and adapt because they've been in one comfortable, steady environment with a false sense of stability, with a false sense of security, and all of a sudden, it's they're not equipped to survive on their own. And so there's different risks, and the risks of being a dog are far more hidden than the risks of being a wolf. And I think that right now in 2021, we're sitting at the sort of the beginning of what I anticipate to be a sharp acceleration of changes in the labor market driven by technology. And so you're going to have a lot more dogs without owners once the shape of the firm changes significantly. Once you have uh, what's a good example? Once you have 1,000 employees at Amazon displacing 100,000 retail employees, once you have technology replacing labor in more and more and more cases, automation happening in more and more and more places, all the people that are dependent on their living as a driver for a different company right now. Then when there's autonomous vehicles, all of a sudden the bowl of food is not being filled every day, and so we really need to, in my opinion, everybody should be thinking about, okay, if I'm a dog right now, how am I going to survive when my owner dies? Because I think everybody's owner, everybody's is an exaggeration, but I think the majority of owners, meaning the majority of employers, are going to die at some point in every worker's life that's alive right now, at least people toward the beginning of their careers. And so, how are people going to evolve and adapt and survive when they're forced to? A lot of people aren't really reckoning with this because it is a hidden fragility. It feels very stable when you're getting the same amount direct deposited into your bank every 2 weeks, when all of your peers are also under this illusion of stability and are acting like they're going to be right here and all these opportunities are going to be just the same in 2 decades. It's not like that. It's not going to be like that. It's going to change a lot. A lot of people are going to be forced to adapt, forced to change, or they're going to have trouble surviving. And so that's something that I think people should be paying attention to, keeping an eye on as all of this unfolds, all of this different disruption, information technology, digitization, and sort of the concepts of the sovereign individual begin to play out in the coming decades.
Yeah, definitely freedom is never that free, but also being a dog or a company man is also coming with hidden risks. So if you are a company man, then better take something back for your future self and try to build a life where you have some assets for you working for you, or have saved up a decent amount where you can at least have a time period where you learn to be more self-reliant and take some risks and get some rewards and try
Exactly.
different experiments and so on.
Yeah.
But also, it will not take down all. It will disrupt many places, and the things that are coming, maybe the economic development will be different than we know it. Like, we never seen the things that may come now. Nobody knows when they come, but it seems that there's so much debt going into this whole economy, in this whole world economy, that it seems to be stable because people can work or can pay their bills and invest in something, but this comes with those hidden risks of blow up. Like, what happens if the debt has to be repaid? And finally, it will be repaid by all the people holding cash, maybe, because the value of all this cash will go down, like it did all the time now. Like all the history of the dollar, I don't know. I guess 100 years ago, the dollar, $2 were somehow of really much value, and now it's only, you can buy some snacks for it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I think personally speaking, I think we're about to see an acceleration of inflation. And I don't know how much to weigh my own intuitions on these things. Perhaps I'm missing something that a lot of other people are seeing, but I go out there every day and I'm paying for things every day. I'm paying wages, I'm paying for supplies, I'm paying for logistics, I'm paying for shipping, I'm paying for insurance, I'm paying for all these things. Everything's going up 10 to 20% in a year. And yet everybody's saying like, okay, this is just temporary, this is just a few percent, like we're gonna get this back to plus or minus 2%. And I just think that these things are accelerating in the system is complex, and it really is about to be disruptive in a way that many people still are not recognizing and reckoning with. But who knows? Maybe I'll be wrong.
Yeah, I don't have this direct experience with paying costs and paying shipping and so on, but I also feel something that it's going to be more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I wanted to talk about another idea
Mm-hmm.
that I found really valuable. It's this effect if a book is already in print for 100 years, like the ones from Hermann Hesse. It's the pronunciation in German is Hermann Hesse.
Oh, good
But
enough.
I like to call him Hermann Hesse as well. If a book is already in print for 100 years, it's this Lindy effect is saying that it is most likely to be in print for the next 100 years as well, because time is like a filter. If something goes through it, it sorts it out. Like, time is the ultimate expert. If you put a system to the tests, you don't call some experts and ask them, okay, what do you think of this system, and will it stay or will it go? You can do this for sure, but the ultimate expert is time. Whether the system survives or not, time will tell, and therefore you can tell if it's robust enough, or if it's even anti-fragile, if it grows from disorder or loses from disorder, if it's built in a way where it learns and it's possible to evolve, is able to evolve, or where it's just robust and goes on and on and on. But it's a great heuristic that I use in everyday life, deciding which books to read next.
Yeah.
For this one, I use it the most, deciding which books to read next, because like Dale Carnegie books,
Yeah.
those ones are so great, and they brought so much value for so many people. And if the book is in print 40 years now or longer, then I will definitely take a look on it if it's still in print. So, and also the other way around, if the book just comes out now, if it's a favorite author of mine, I just take it and read it or listen to it. But if it's just a catchy title, and then I at least let it be for some years and turn my attention to something that time told that it's valuable enough for my limited attention in this limited life.
Yeah, I think to kind of build on that a little bit, I think that there's such a big difference over time what you gain from learning, absorbing, focusing your attention and energy on the timely versus the timeless. So many people in the world are watching the news every day and absorbing and reading newspapers and seeing what event just happened and who just said what and what political figure just stepped on whose toes and what the dynamic is of this one vote that's upcoming in Congress or of this one outrage that somebody is offended over, yada, yada, yada. There's all this timely information that's being bombarded at everybody. You have these news corporations with terrible incentives to just outrage the shit out of people and to grab as many clicks and as much attention as possible with the most if it bleeds it reads type of mentality behind a lot of these things. And people all the time are getting sucked into this whole sphere of information, this whole this culture of Twitter where everybody's mobbing at different people, and this whole very what's hot, what's recent, what's right now, what's everybody else thinking about. And if you spend 10 years spending every day pouring energy into this, you will literally be no better off because you will not know anything about what's coming this coming week. You literally will have you'll have to constantly keep feeding yourself just to keep up with this stuff, as opposed to, and the news of 5 years ago no longer serves you. Like, if you want to see how unimportant timely news tends to be, then just force yourself to read only news that's 2 weeks old for a month, and you'll realize how unimportant, how irrelevant all of this stuff is. Whereas if you're reading classic works, if you're reading physics, if you're reading a lot of philosophy, if you're reading novels that have stood the test of time, then you can actually accumulate. Then you can actually learn and gain concepts and gain mental models that build on each other in a way that's fundamentally necessarily impossible if you're focused on the timely. I think that one of the best principles of personal growth, of learning, is to focus on the timeless instead of the timely, because the timeless accumulates, the timeless builds on each other. The timely is like refilling a cup that's constantly leaking from the bottom.
Yes, never in my life, at least not a point where I can recall it, the news has made me smarter or made me decide something valuable. Like, more the other way around, when I listened to the news, then I got into decisions and acted upon decisions that in effect just were bad for me.
Yeah, and it's not people's fault either who are absorbing this. In my opinion, one of the biggest lies that anybody is telling people, literally in my view, it's just one step below tobacco companies telling people that cigarettes are good for you, is the news and all these media corporations telling you that it's your civic duty to stay informed, or
Mhm.
you are, or trying to convince people that they're virtuous, that they're moral for keeping up with things and being pissed off at the right things, and taking the right side of an issue, even though it literally does not matter at all what I think about any issue. It literally does not affect a single congressman's vote. It will not affect anybody one time in my entire life what my opinion is about any political issue. It literally does not matter. I have no influence over it. But people spend their whole life staying informed about things and thinking that they're doing the right thing, thinking that they're doing the virtuous thing, listening to everybody around them who's telling them that it's their duty to stay informed, and telling them that, oh yeah, this is like, it's sort of a productive, it's a productive activity. And it's so seductive when people have the opportunity to feel virtuous about being outraged, or when people have the opportunity to be just absolutely pissed off about them and an outgroup, and a people that they disagree with, and to feel patted on the back for having the opinions and having the inclinations that they have, and therefore feeding into this system where they're constantly staying informed for the sake of staying informed, even though they don't make a single different decision in the real world from it. It's an addiction that's plaguing so many people. It's a parasite that preys on the minds of literally hundreds of millions of people who think that they're doing something good for themselves and for the world at large. It's a total scam. And all these bad incentives of these news companies are just feeding into the system, and actually echoing each other and reinforcing this warped culture of staying informed, quote unquote, of feeding yourself this toxic information that preys on your mind, that takes up your mind space and prevents you, because it crowds out all of your opportunity for real learning, for reading books, for learning
Mhm.
new opportunities, for gaining mental models, for reading philosophy in a way that helps you build an evaluated and examined system of ethics and morality. It prevents all of that because it's too busy preying and sucking out all your nutrients, all your energy, all your
Mhm.
mind space, and and dividing you from other people, making you feel like I can't like a Republican, or I can't like a Democrat, or I just want to group all of these people into a label that makes them feel like the enemy to me, that makes them feel evil to me, that puts them in just this absolutely simplistic label and grouping that doesn't actually map to reality, who they are as individuals, how different each one can be, how virtuous somebody can be, even if they disagree with me in so many ways. That's what I think is preying on so many people. It's this massive addiction that's being fed by people that are saying that this is good for you, and it really reminds me quite a bit of big tobacco back in the day, or of frankly social media as well today. It's incredible. It's going on before our eyes, and very few people
Mhm.
can see what's going on and call this out for what it is. And even the people that do see it oftentimes become prey to it in certain ways.
And it seems that this whole system is corrupted in a way that everything that they just do to get from one ad spot to the next,
Yeah,
and whatever keeps the attention of the users, consumers, or readers, whatever keeps the attention, and mostly the negative stuff, mostly the stuff that just triggers your fear or triggers your anger, whatever keeps them consuming will be produced. And therefore, this whole system incentives is corrupted. You won't be smarter reading the news. So therefore, I don't read the news neither. Um, but if there's something really important that you should also know, then it gets filtered by the people that
yeah.
you talk to.
People will
Like,
tell you.
did you hear about this and this? No, tell me. So that I don't have to waste any time reading news or listening to radio when I could just listen to an audiobook, or just be free of any inputs and listen to my own thoughts. Just listen to the birds in nature. That's also
Yeah,
good.
far preferable.
Yeah.
One other idea that I liked in this book that I want to touch on before we wrap up is the idea of minority rule.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really like, this is before reading this book, I just did not have this mental model in my head. It was going on right in front of me, but I never realized what was going on. And it's situations where you have a small proportion of the population, say 3%, who have skin in the game or soul in the game and really care about one thing or another. An easy example is when you're on the East Coast and you have a beverage. Oftentimes there's a symbol on there and it's kosher, even though the vast majority of the population in the East Coast is not Jewish, doesn't care about kosher shit at all. I think Jews make up 0.2% of the population of the United States or something like that. But yet all of these drinks are, I forget what kosher even means. It's like blessed by a rabbi and doesn't contain certain ingredients or something like that. And it's because even though the Jewish population is just a tiny proportion of who's out there, they actually care about whether or not something's kosher. Whereas people who are non-kosher don't care. They're indifferent. Like they'll drink a kosher thing just as readily as they'll drink a non-kosher thing. And so companies don't want to have this complexity of having a kosher offering and a non-kosher offering, and so they just make all of the drinks kosher. And that's an example of just a small proportion of the people in turn cause 100% of the drinks to be a certain way. And that principle, that's just one example, of course. It plays out in tons of different ways with different logic and different types of incentives. But that force of one small portion of the population just totally changing the rules, changing the status of something for everybody because they're the ones that care it plays out in a lot of different ways, and it explains a lot of different phenomena that we witness in our life that are otherwise kind of challenging to comprehend.
Yes, my favorite example for the application of the minority rule is if you're in a company, in a meeting, and here in Germany or in Switzerland, we all speak German, and but there's one person who does not understand or speak German, then everybody switches to this bad English that we're hearing now, or even worse. so, but
Much worse.
to understand each other, everybody has um, to go to the language that everybody understands. And the one person who does not understand the language that all the rest speaks uh, has the effect on the group setting that everybody now speaks his language. And the same is with the most intransigent or intolerant people. If you're really intolerant about stuff, and then most of the people don't care, then you have the influence on the political systems, and you will have the effect that everybody else now also will have to live with. Uh, I don't know what's it all about, but I recently see this effect of the minority rule in terms of gendering and so on. Just because some people really feel valued or valued if you correctly gender, or dislike it if you don't, then they have this pressure upon all the institutions that everything now has to be gendered, even if the majority of the people just is good with living as it was before. But just so that you don't set up this small percentage of people. I don't have a big opinion on this, but this is an example of the minority rule, that a small percentage of the people has an improportionate effect on the rest of the people and the lives of the rest of the people.
That's such a good example. I haven't even thought of that, but the whole like he him pronouns at the end of people's like email signatures and shit like that, and LinkedIn and all this stuff. Like 99% of people, literally, like it's very obvious if they're a man or a woman. It's very obvious what pronouns they would want. Like nobody, I don't think in my entire life has questioned whether or not I would be a he, him, as opposed to
Yeah.
a she, her, or a z, him, or whatever. And but yet, so many I don't know the numbers, but I feel like in the corporate world, at least, it's like 80% of people are now putting their pronouns in one form or another on different formats, and it is 100% because a small, tiny proportion of people really give a fuck about this, and the rest of people are like, whatever, I'll throw it there. I don't really give a shit, and I'll just kind of go along with it. You see that in tons of places. I think just to riff on a few examples, you have cancel culture where somebody says something that offends a small group of people. 5% of people get outraged and tweet and try to come at, like, talk to their boss and put pressure on the people around them and try to get them fired from whatever they're doing and try to get them canceled and taken off of this or that. And it works all the time. Like, people are constantly being deplatformed. People are constantly getting fired just because they pissed off a small proportion of people. 5% of the people that happen to be 60% of the tweets that are sent out and happen to be disproportionately loud and disproportionately willing to throw a fit and boycott or whatever. Just a tiny sliver of the population can have this totally outsized influence. And then, honestly, we were getting to a point where it's controlling the speech, where it's controlling the opinions, where it's controlling the actions of what are ostensibly the most powerful people around. And here's a
That's getting
situation.
dangerous then. If
Exactly.
there's no free speech anymore, then it's dangerous.
And here's a situation where the same skin in the game mantra actually reverses, because these people that are CEOs of companies, they don't have skin in the game. And what that means is they're not evaluated by the real world. They're not evaluated by how their company actually does, in large part. They're not, professors are not evaluated by the real world in any way at all. Like, they literally have no recourse to reality whatsoever. They're in a complete bubble. But what they are accountable to is the opinions of their peers. They're accountable to the opinions of other people. And so the less skin in the game you have, the more actually that you have to care about what other people think of you. The more vulnerable you become to the intolerant minority that wants to cancel you, that wants to get you out. If somebody tries to cancel me, I literally don't have to give a fuck. Like, if it's my employees, I do. Like, I have to get them to buy into me. I have to earn their respect. I have to be there for them and develop a relationship with them and build trust. But if an entire Twitter mob comes at me, nobody can fire me because I have skin in the game. I'm accountable to my customers. I'm accountable to my employees. I'm accountable to the free market in the real world, but not to the opinion of anybody except for a very small handful of people that depend on me and that I depend on in turn. Whereas if I were the CEO of Unilever, I would have to be terrified by what every reporter says, by what every news outlet says, by what every tweeter says, by what every comment I make, how it could be twisted. You're completely vulnerable to the opinions of other people because you're not vulnerable to anything else. That is how you become who you are. That is how you get your position. And so these two forces of skin in the game decreasing, accountability to the real world decreasing, causes accountability to other people's opinions to increase. And in turn, that creates the tyranny of the minority in so many cases, where the most outraged people can really make the rules on so many things just by virtue of being the only people that actually care.
Yes, it's the big heuristics that definitely sheds light on some things that are happening in the world. And I definitely use it to see effects of things that happen.
And it's interesting too to see the how this minority rule and the most intransigent minority has played out in the history of religion, because when Islam spread throughout much of the Arab world, obviously after the time of Muhammad, and during, actually, in large part, the way that it was able to capture so much of the population was through its intransigence in different ways. Through like, if there are two parents, or if two people get married, one's a Muslim, one's a non-Muslim, the non-Muslim is required to convert to Islam. If two parents, or I think maybe if it's a male and a female, but not vice versa, something like that. It depends on the circumstance. But anyways, they're far more rigid on somebody has to convert in if you want to marry them, as opposed to the other way around. If there's two parents and they have two different religions, one of them's Muslim, the kid's required to be Muslim. If you are an apostate, you get murdered, and you cannot leave this organization. And so that means if you ever convert, if you're a kid of a Muslim, then you have to marry somebody and convert them, and your kids then have to be automatically that way. Nobody can ever leave. Nobody can get off the ride. And because of these rules, it's able to gain more and more and more of the population over time. And then you say, like, oh wow, Christianity got squeezed out by a lot of this. But then you look at the history of Christianity. It was in fact the most intolerant religion in the Roman Empire. all of the Romans were like, sure, fuck it, like if Jesus can join our pantheon, like we'll worship your God too, we can add him on. But the Christians were like, no, nobody except our
It's
God. Ours is the
only
only
one
one.
God.
Like you cannot talk about
You
anybody else
cannot
except
put Jesus into the pantheon.
exactly, like by himself or not at all, like only. And it was far more rigid, like our way or the highway. There's no, like, it has to be just this alone. And the logic of that was a big part of why Christianity was able to spread and consolidate power more and more and more in the Roman Empire, and then of course afterwards. And so it can't act like a victim of an intransigent minority itself, because that's how it became so influential in the first place. And
And
you
by
can
the
just,
way,
mhm.
did you see the video of the spread of the religions, the spread of world religions? We will put it in the description below, but
That
it's
sounds interesting.
definitely worth seeing. It's like 5,000 years of history, and then you see the beginnings of Hinduism in India, and then rising of Buddhism, and it spreads faster and faster, but then a lot of time nothing. And 2000, like in the year 0 BC, DC, and before that the Jews a little bit arised, but then they got spread the diaspora, and then Christianity arises and Muslim and the Islam. And if you see the Islam spreading, it's like,
Yeah.
and then Christianity is, and
Yeah.
Islam is it's definitely a video worth taking a look on.
Yeah. That sounds
There,
interesting.
there you see that the most intransigent minority will always be on top in the long run, as a system theory, as game theory, game theoretically played out.
It's evolution. It's what ideas are able to survive and reproduce the most.
Mhm.
It just goes back to the same logic as biology. It goes back to the same logic as politics. It goes back to the same logic as so many games that are playing. Some things survive more than others. Then there's selection at each generation over time, and eventually it's the traits that are really good at propagating themselves and
Mhm.
really good at surviving that take up the whole pie.
And for surviving, all your ideas you act upon have to be rooted in reality. The better they are rooted in the real world, in reality, the better you are able to adapt, the better you are able to survive with them. If you have these constructions in your mind high up in the clouds, and then you get hit by the real world, and then all your ideas are for nothing. And also, if you have some ideas, this is how it should be, this is how should people behave, but you yourself won't behave like this, then it's not your private life that is for nothing, but your ideas. So this is also a big idea, that the ideas have to be rooted in reality to be
Yeah.
able to have a healthy effect on the systematic way you are proceeding with your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. Nice, man. Well, you want to wrap it up here? This was a great discussion
It's
of the book. I
great.
really
Yeah,
enjoyed kind of
I
throwing these
really
ideas
enjoyed
around.
it. Yeah, me too, man. It was such a great discussion with you. And I also enjoy that I was somehow pain free. And
Ah, lovely.
yes, it's this connection. It's just great. And I guess if you have friends around, then also pain won't last too long.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely helps.
Thanks again, Peyton, for taking your time. And I hope the next weeks won't be too hard for you, but I hope also there will be many opportunities for growth, and that you will root your ideas, how you steer your company, how you will treat your employees, and root the ideas you have about it in reality.
Yes.
And from there on, have a good time and a great learning experience and a great
Yes.
evolution.
A lot of skin in the game, no doubt.
A lot of a lot of skin in the game leads to create evolution for the
Yes.
system.
Yes. Well, it's great talking with you, my friend. As always, I really appreciate your perspective and ideas. Really enjoyed talking about these books. Looking forward to the next time. Best of luck with what's going on in your world as well. I wish you
Thanks,
a
man.
week that's as pain-free as possible.
Yes, I hope so. Thanks. Do we want to take a next book that we want to reread together?
Ah, yeah, good idea. What are you feeling?
I don't have a something in my mind right now. What about you?
Let's see. Um, let me pull up a list. Mm, okay, some ideas I could throw out. I could go for awareness. I could go for thinking fast and slow. I could go for the origins of virtue, which is a Ridley book. Um, maybe like a meditations, like a Stoic book, or even the Tao of
Hmm.
Seneca, perhaps.
Yeah,
Hmm,
let's do meditations. That's a short and concise book, but
it's a
also
beautiful
really
book.
fundamental and valuable. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
really
it's a
love
great
it.
book.
And he's one of those emperors who had skin in the game, who valued doing much more than talking, and who actually died in battle as well, didn't he?
Did he? I didn't know that.
I thought so. He died with 45 years old.
Nice. Yeah,
Huh?
he was awesome, and I love that Meditations wasn't even written to be published. It was just his
Yes,
journal, and we're kind of seeing
yes.
inside of the mind of, in my opinion, one of the wisest men that's ever held power in the history of the world. So it'll
Yeah.
be, yeah, definitely. I look forward to rereading it. I think it'll be very apropos for where I'm at right now too,
Hmm.
to be reminding myself of these principles and these mental models and just useful perspectives and mindsets to have approaching the real world.
I guess Marcus Aurelius' meditations will definitely give us some valuable principles for the times we are right now.
No question. No question.
Great, man.
All right. I look forward to it. I will see you the next time, my friend.
See you the next time, my friend. Thanks for everything. Bye bye.
Likewise. Take care.